At the beginning of the movie, we see a man walking toward the dense forests of New Zealand. He parks his car at the entrance of the jungle and checks his phone, which is filled with missed calls. However, Ian, the man in question, ignores them all. Instead, he grabs his gear from the car and heads straight into the wilderness. It becomes clear from his attire and movement that Ian is an amateur. He has no real knowledge of hiking. He moves forward at a slow pace, occasionally stopping to observe his surroundings. Within minutes, exhaustion starts to set in, and it's evident that he hasn't brought any essential safety equipment with him. A little while later, Ian spots a hiker couple taking pictures. This sight seems to unsettle him, and instead of interacting with them, he chooses to hide and wait for them to leave. This moment reveals something crucial about Ian. He is an introvert, someone who prefers solitude over company. After waiting for quite some time, Ian, now visibly fatigued, starts to move again. However, just as he does, one of the hikers, a man named Nick, notices him. Nick enthusiastically approaches Ian and bombards him with questions, making Ian visibly nervous. Struggling to respond, Ian hesitantly answers him. Nick then suggests they hike to the waterfall together, but Ian, wanting to be alone, refuses. However, Nick is persistent and convinces him to join. To ensure Ian doesn't slip away, Nick insists that Ian walk ahead of him. As they continue their journey, they eventually reach a secluded cabin deep in the forest. Along the way, they search for the couple Ian had seen earlier, Monica and Austin. That night, Ian attempts to cook some meat in the cabin's kitchen. When Nick notices Ian's struggle with the food, Ian, embarrassed, quickly pulls the undercooked meat off the fire. Nick, realizing Ian's lack of experience, instructs him to cook it properly. Ian tries again, but while distracted by something else, he accidentally lets the meat burn, causing flames to rise from the stove. Just then, Nick and Monica rush in to put out the fire. Meanwhile, Ian quietly gathers his belongings and prepares to slip away unnoticed. As Ian ventures further into the forest, he suddenly spots something that fills him with terror. Overcome with fear, he rushes back to the cabin without a second thought. The next morning, the group leaves the cabin together, chatting casually as they continue their hike. For hours, they walk without any obstacles, but at one point, Ian starts to feel as if someone is following them. When he turns around to check, there's no one in sight. Growing anxious, he asks his companions if they noticed anything unusual. However, they see nothing and try to reassure him. Understanding Ian's nervous state, they lie and suggest that it was probably just an animal. After several more hours of hiking, they reach another campsite. Inside, they find 2 abandoned backpacks, but there's no sign of anyone around. While the others seem unbothered by this, Ian feels uneasy about their situation. However, the rest of the group ignores his concerns, instead choosing to play music and dance. That night, Ian struggles to fall asleep. Restless, he gets up and wanders around the campsite. Sensing his unease, Nick approaches him and asks if everything is okay. Nick had noticed Ian acting strangely throughout their journey and was beginning to get concerned. To help him relax, Nick hands Ian a sleeping pill, which he takes without hesitation. Once Nick leaves, Ian decides to check the abandoned backpacks. Inside, he finds a camera and, without hesitation, turns it on. As he scrolls through the pictures, he sees 2 young women enjoying their hike through the forest. However, something catches his attention. There is another person in the background of the images. When Ian zooms in, he is stunned. The man in the photos is none other than Nick. Shocked, Ian tries to find more details, but before he can, dizziness overtakes him, and he collapses to the floor. The next morning, Ian wakes up to find himself wrapped in a blanket. Nick tells him that he covered him up so he wouldn't get sick. However, Ian remains suspicious. Determined to confront Nick, he pulls out the camera and accuses him of stalking the 2 women. Monica and Austin ask to see the photos, but before Ian can show them, the camera's battery dies. Despite this, Ian continues to accuse Nick, claiming that he must have led the 2 women somewhere remote. Ian continues to accuse Nick, insisting that he drugged him on purpose to stop him from uncovering the truth. However, Nick remains silent, refusing to defend himself. Ian keeps throwing accusations at him until, suddenly, the 2 missing hikers, the women from the photos, appear. Realizing his mistake, Ian is immediately overcome with guilt and embarrassment. He apologizes to Nick for his harsh behavior, explaining that his paranoia was due to sleep deprivation. To Ian's surprise, Nick forgives him effortlessly, acting as if nothing had happened. Austin and Monica also sympathize with Ian, trying to reassure him in every way possible. With tensions eased, the group packs up their belongings and continues their journey. Soon, they reach a fork in the trail. One path leads toward the waterfall, while the other goes deeper into the forest. Monica and Austin express their interest in exploring the forest, having heard that it is incredibly beautiful. With that, the group splits into 2, each pair heading in different directions. Ian and Nick continue their hike for several hours as darkness begins to fall. Eventually, they reach a point where Ian starts to feel uneasy again, but his fear quickly fades when he catches sight of the breathtaking waterfall ahead. As night fully sets in, they find themselves facing a narrow and risky trail. Ian hesitates hesitates, suggesting they find another way, but Nick insists that this is the only path forward. He hands Ian an expensive flashlight, instructing him to lead the way. However, after walking just a short distance, Ian loses his footing. The flashlight slips from his grasp and tumbles down the steep slope. Nick, visibly frustrated, scolds Ian and orders him to climb down and retrieve it. Though hesitant and afraid, Ian obeys and carefully descends the slope. Just as he reaches the bottom, he suddenly freezes. Something is standing right next to him. Panic surges through Ian as he lets out a terrified scream and runs back up as fast as he can. Meanwhile, Austin and Monica, who are nearby, hear Ian's screams echoing through the forest. As they hear Ian's terrified screams, Austin and Monica rush toward him, with Nick arriving shortly after. They all peer down the slope, trying to spot whatever had been chasing Ian, but just like before, there was nothing in sight. Later, at a nearby cabin, the group gathers, deeply concerned about Ian. Austin and Monica, still on their honeymoon, decide it's best to get Ian out of the forest as soon as possible. Nick agrees, realizing that Ian's paranoia is only getting worse. The next morning, Nick and Ian set off toward the city. After walking for hours, Nick suddenly feels the urge to relieve himself and steps away into the bushes. Meanwhile, Ian, lost in his thoughts, begins to replay everything that had been haunting him. After some time, he realizes that Nick has been gone for far too long. Calling out to him, Ian receives no response. Growing increasingly uneasy, he cautiously walks in the direction Nick had gone. Then, he sees something so horrifying that his body freezes in terror, his fear so overwhelming that he loses control of himself. In the next scene, we see Ian frantically running back to Austin and Monica. He gasps for air as he tells them that Nick has been killed. However, Ian is in such a state of shock that he struggles to explain what actually happened. His panicked, fragmented words only make Austin and Monica more suspicious. They start to believe that Ian might have been the one who killed Nick. Feeling threatened, Austin pulls out a knife and orders Ian to stay away. Shortly after, the couple continues their journey, deciding to stop and rest for a while. But just as Monica takes a moment to relax, an unseen force suddenly grabs her from behind and drags her away into the darkness. Austin watches in horror, immediately rushing after her. As he searches, he stumbles upon something chilling, Monica's lifeless body. At that moment, Ian arrives at the scene. Seeing him there, Austin's grief and rage turn into fury. "You did this!" he yells, charging toward Ian, ready to attack. But before he can reach him, Austin's foot suddenly gets caught in a hidden trap. Then, out of nowhere, they both witness a terrifying sight. A massive, dinosaur-like creature dragging Monica's body away. Panic surges through them as they realize they are dealing with something far beyond their understanding. Thinking quickly, Ian helps free Austin from the trap, and the two of them sprint toward a nearby cabin. Once inside, they barricade the doors and windows, desperately trying to come up with a plan to survive. But before they can even think, the monstrous creature returns, its sharp, blade-like claws scraping against the cabin walls. With a powerful strike, the creature smashes through the cabin door, lunging straight at Austin. Before he can react, the monstrous beast attacks, ending his life in an instant. Now, Ian is its next target. The creature charges at him, but he narrowly dodges its lethal blow. Realizing he has no other choice, Ian seizes an opportunity. Grabbing the creature by the throat, he uses all his strength to wrestle it to the ground. Struggling against its sheer force, he presses down harder and harder, until, at last, the beast goes still. The next morning, Ian stumbles out of the forest, exhausted and shaken. He makes his way toward the parking lot where he had left his car, desperate to leave this nightmare behind. But just as he nears the exit, a horrifying sight stops him in his tracks. The lifeless body of one of the missing hikers hangs from a tree. A sense of dread washes over him. As he cautiously moves forward, he comes across a cluster of large, strange-looking eggs. That's when it dawns on him. There are more of those creatures out here. Panic sets in. Just as he turns to flee, another monstrous predator appears, launching a brutal attack. The beast knocks him to the ground, its razor-sharp beak striking his leg, leaving him wounded. But Ian refuses to give up. Summoning every ounce of his willpower, he breaks free and sprints away. Through sheer determination, he finally reaches the highway, gasping for breath. Spotting an approaching vehicle, he throws himself into the road, waving desperately. "Please, help me!" he cries out. And with that, Loop Track comes to a thrilling end. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting movie explanations. Thanks.